Then everyone just gets to look at our sweet faces.
with our stylish glasses. Look at you.
I know we're both like into the stylish glasses, aren't we?
I have to keep myself amused.
Okay, it looks like it's working. We're on both spots now.
Beautiful. Yay. We are here together
So
across time and space.
I was just joking with Wendy. So Wendy, shall we tell everyone first how we met?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Is that a
We're both
Hivery event in San Francisco?
The Hivery is a women-fueled co-working space and community founded by a wonderful woman named Grace Crovinger.
And
And I
you
have
used to do
a
some work there, right? You used to do some development work, right?
We used to do some work there, and we met at basically a summit, a live summit called the E-Lab, the Entrepreneurs Lab. It's 2 years ago, I think. And we happened
Maybe
to
longer.
have sat up front together and started up a conversation.
We talked a
And
little about social justice. We talked a little bit. We went right into the hard topics kind of fast. And we're like,
mhm.
oh, yeah, we could talk about
I
this.
loved what you're doing with Sidewalk Talk because I love simple, elegant ideas
Hmm,
that create change.
I appreciate that. Well,
Yeah.
I want to just bring everyone into your world, Wendy, and because you're a wise soul.
Mhm.
You've been teaching people for a long time and strategizing and helping organizations do what I believe is become more conscious, not just on the people level, but on the organizational level. So, can you bring us into your world a little bit and kind of tell us the timeline of your
Hmm.
serving the world life?
Right now, I'm having fun because I feel like all the parts of me, the creative side, the mission minded, the impact I want to make in the world, the people I get to work with, all comes together under one roof. And that's kind of rare. And I hope it's not rare. I think, I'd love it not to be rare for people. So I work with companies and we help catalyze energy for organizations. So human energy, you know, team energy, and the organizational vitality so that organizations can accomplish what matters to them most and that people can find joy and passion in the work that they do and that they can work together well, right? And, oh, Tracy, I think you went on mute.
As a new leader myself, why do you think it's hard once we amass a certain number of people? Because as organizations grow, it becomes harder and harder to
Mhm.
stay in a lane of core values or to not let our old systems of power and dominance take over how
Mhm.
we're leading, or you know how can we do better in organizations as we're running them? What have you learned?
I think that life, wherever we are, is really just one big fat mindfulness project. And it's like having the daily mindful awareness around what are the values that we founded the company on? How do we stay in touch with those in an active, alive way? That includes how do we talk to each other? How do we communicate organization wide, right? How do we take a stand when our organization butts up against difficult conversations or that fork in the road of are we going to go down this path or this path? Well, you've got roots that can guide you in making that decision. And when you veer away too far from your roots, that's when confusion happens and you lose the cohesion and you have to spend more time communicating that gap because people can feel it, right?
Yeah, yeah. So what do you think the things are in the workplace that you have found? I mean, well, I don't want to I'm going into the weeds and I want to get the bigger picture.
Hmm.
So tell me some of the things that you've done in your work, because I want to help everybody place you. Like, okay, well, is
Mhm.
she from the Bay Area? Is she from New York? Is she,
Gotcha.
where is she from? And like, what is her background in? So give us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I'll go back because I think that was your first question too. It's like I am a woman of color. I'm a Taiwanese American gal who was born in Taiwan, grew up speaking the language, and I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Illinois. And then I lived in Tokyo for a while, and that was the first time I literally could look around at a sea of black hair and feel like I truly belonged. Even though I wasn't Japanese and I wore the hat of American, woman, office lady, pouring tea, American who spoke fluent English that could lead tours of like ambassadors and lobbyists who were coming from Washington, D.C., because that was my job. I was a legislative aide for a Diet member back during, this is going to date me, but back during the Kuwait War. And moved from there into public policy degree, worked in environmental protection for a little while, had kids, stayed home for 10 years. I'm actually proud of that and understand that as a privilege at the time to be able to do that. And then went into education and have a master's in educational leadership. Was very privileged to work in a very progressive school that that really did a lot well, right? So we really learned how to pull diversity, inclusion, and belonging practices all the way through into hiring and giving everyone a voice, and what were the processes that let that happen? How do we distribute leadership so that teachers could own what they were creating for each other? It was also a school that was named an Ashoka Changemaker School. So it was
cool. Okay,
really
I didn't
teaching
realize this.
people
Okay.
about empathy, right? Like how, and a little background on that is that Ashoka studied all of their fellowships that they were giving out grant money through the years. I think it's like a 30-year history. And the theme among all of them was it started with empathy. Someone had empathy for a population or for a problem that needed to be solved, and through empathy designed the solutions. And so Ashoka wanted to study, how do you teach empathy? If we could teach kids empathy at scale, what would the world actually look like? So
Wow.
we were one of the schools in their program. We also hosted a TEDx. So for a school to host a TEDx conference that had more than 800 educators from the Bay Area, it was on compassion and education.
Wow.
How do you bring that alive? And we partnered with the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. Dovetail Learning has a wonderful SEL, social emotional program called Toolbox. And so and gendered spectrum training on non-binary inclusive practices and inclusive language. We shadowed students so that we could, as administrators, we shadowed students so we could understand their process of going through school. And that elicited like, oh, well, when we have assemblies and we have guest speakers coming in, they need to know about pronouns. They need to not say girls and boys and without understanding the broader context of what our community was heading for. So we got to really become a learning community as adults as well. And then when I left school, I jumped into the entrepreneurial space because at that time we were talking about flipped classrooms, blended learning, and I felt like not enough adults experientially knew what that felt like. So I took on a lot of learning for myself and landed in Seth Godin's Alt MBA program.
Oh, really? Amazing. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I just he has the highest, completion rate, or that's part of his marketing pitch, but it really was a fabulous program. And so I now see myself in the role that I play at Intune as also a experience designer, right? And how do I look at a company or a nonprofit or a school, because I still do work with schools, as a thriving learning community, right? Like how do you get the adults to thrive in learning together? Because when we're learning, we're activated, we're connected to work that matters. And then how do we share learning and make it transparent and digestible for one another?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my theory of change, I think,
No, I think that's beautiful. It reminds me of something that the podcast that went live today with Toko Paul-Mollers, the founder of Art of Hosting, said the same, similar. He says, when we're learning, anything's possible. So it sounds so in alignment with what he was saying. I'm so intrigued. First of all, I love the name of your organization. I love Intune. So explain to me what Intune is as an entity and what impact do you hope that you have on the world?
Yeah. We are a consulting company that also provides coaching and learning and development and also branding. So it's very holistic. We've got a team that can execute on that. And we will look at, basically it's about raising consciousness. So taking an individual as a leader, on the C-suite, a manager, and taking them into deeper self-knowledge about who they are and what they're bringing to the table, and helping them clear like social emotional roadblocks or leadership roadblocks so that they can have more release of who they are into the system.
Yeah.
And then we do that with teams as well. So we'll bring a team together and help them develop the cohesion. And there are organizations that are doing this beautifully, like Patrick Lencioni with the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Like, he does beautiful work. And we are just working with that team in a way where they can move as one, right? So the alignment, and that they have the skills, and we've helped them build the capacity to carry on beyond us, right? That's our goal.
Okay.
And then for an organization to come up with a recipe of a system change within the organization so that they can be operating at their highest level, highest potential, and see that possibility is actually really motivating. But we're too often like behind limiting beliefs of the individuals, right? Limiting beliefs of a culture where we say, well, we tried that, but we can't do that. Or I've got too much on my plate. I'm just too busy. I can't do that.
Never said that before.
And it's just everything's a priority. Putting people into intentional choice with what they say they do and what they say it matters to them. And it's helping develop a disciplined body of practice that's more culture-wide in an organization.
Beautiful. Well, and you and I started getting excited talking to each other because I think we both sort of had this aha moment that we're like, oh, I didn't know you were into somatics. And you were like, I didn't know you were into somatics. And you're like, yeah, no, I'm like doing, like I trained with Stacey Haynes 15 years ago when she was at Generation, I think it was Generation 5. That's what she called it. So tell me how, because I'm going to try not to get too excited. So calm down, Tracy. Tell me about your excitement about how bringing the body into some of this work that you do with teams. The title of our conversation is Using Embodiment to Connect. Has kind of changed your lens even.
We all have bodies. Like, that's a common denominator across every single human being, regardless of how able-bodied we are or what other neurodiversity we have. We all have bodies, and we are feeling animals. And so in our bodies, we all have signals that are activating all the time, right? And there's a common denominator, like, what does fear feel like? It mostly feels the same for most of us, so we can name it. Or anxiety, or stress, or overwhelm. Those are the things that people want to problem solve for. That's why we seek out help, and that's why In Tune is also named In Tune, by the way. It's like when you're in tune and you're in alignment with who you are and feeling like this alignment, like you become a tuning fork in your life, right? And what powerful actions can you take from there, as opposed to feeling like I'm discombobulated, I'm not grounded, I'm seeking validation from other people rather than tapping into trusting myself.
Did you read my journal last night?
No.
Those two things that you just said. I'm like, yeah. I mean, so, but how, I'm going to play dumb like a fox here, but how some people might say, but come on, Wendy, you're telling me that I could actually change how I show up at work by just paying attention to my body.
Totally. We have one leader, someone that we're coaching who, for example, when he's stressed or he feels under pressure, he starts talking really, really fast. He talks faster like this. His voice gets a little bit higher. You can tell his breathing moves from like even reaching past his diaphragm to like upper body, shallow breathing. And it becomes hard, and he paces. So you can tell he's not comfortable in his own skin in that moment. So something triggered him. So by bringing awareness to him, like, do you notice the changes that are happening in your body? Can you understand and back off when you feel that, to stop yourself and say, what just triggered me now? And then there's pattern recognition, because once you understand your own personal triggers, think how much more power you have in your life to have better relationships, right? Or verbalize and say, oop, I just got triggered right now. I don't know what it was exactly, but I'm not feeling good. Can we slow down for a second, or can we reset? Right? Sometimes you can't deal with a personal issue at work right away, but can we just reset and take a deep breath? We've taught him to, he has a wall right behind his Zoom screen to back up and put his like sacrum and his lower back and his upper back up to his shoulders up against the wall so he can feel the flat body of support. So he can feel as if someone were standing behind him, supporting him. I've got your back. You know, and that calms him down pretty fast and counteracts that rapid talking, disembodied sensation that he's exhibiting.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that by him learning how to pay attention to the flow of not only breath, but electricity in his body, it's almost like it not only is feeling more supported, but can be in better relationship with his colleagues. Because if he's talking like this, when you did that, all I could imagine.
Oop, you froze. On my end, you're frozen. So I'll pick up where you are. I think it's like where he's talking really fast gets him in his head, right? Then you start spinning and everyone knows what spinning feels like. Or how do you make decisions? How do you contribute thoughtfully? How do you not say things that feel like you don't really mean them? Or you're saying them from a place where you're just reacting rather than responding? And so a big global metaphor is, when COVID happened and everybody went to working at home, and schools had to decide how to design, remote teaching scenarios, how everyone, just went into response mode really, really fast, or reaction mode, actually, not response mode, and reacted to how could we, get back to normal? How could we keep the trains running on time and work happening? And how do we deliver school? And so by slowing down and taking time to reset, taking time to step back, that there's a way to create some space so that as human beings, we can feel the feelings like, gosh, I just got really triggered by the beginning of COVID, the shutdown. I don't know how to run my business. I don't know what happens next. To feel the feelings and make more room, as practitioner David Trelevin says, there is the building of a bigger window of tolerance where you can tolerate more feelings and sensations so that you can be grounded to make decisions about your business, about your life, and so forth. I just took what we were talking about, Tracy, about the individual to more of a global scale, equating it to the pandemic when we're circulating and cycling around what are we going to do next, to when we actually feel the feelings first, and when we pause and step back and say, we don't have to react right now, we can take a little bit of time and move into response mode. That also changes the energy of what we create from there. And I can't hear you. You're not on mute, I don't think.
Whoa. I hear you.
I hear you. I hear you. And I see you now. Excellent. Although it's a little bit frozen. And so embodiment is really, for me, like a bridge. Everyone, because we know what fear feels like, or we know what a knot in our stomach feels like. And when that knot is there, it's a signal that something's wrong, right? And it's a signal that you're under stress or under pressure. And so it's a common experience for all of us. And if we can talk about the wisdom that our bodies have, the signals that our body give us to say, hey, something's not working for you right now. How do you take time out, address it, and use that signal as just another tool in your toolkit? And that's why I love somatic embodiment work, because it's a bridge to a shared experience as a human being. We all have very similar experiences.
Were you talking this whole time?
I kept your show going.
I love it. You were so awesome.
I kept your show going. Hopefully it works.
That is like the coolest thing ever. Okay. Yeah, I don't like, maybe there's resetting the routers here middle of the night here in Germany. So I don't know what you said, but you probably said a lot about the body. So here's the scoop. I know that for a lot of folks, it feels like it's self-indulgent so you and I were, you said something on my LinkedIn the other day about being still, that there's like this energy or motivation they get from that. And you said, no. Still is good. Still is good. Would you be willing to say a little bit more about why stillness is an important embodiment practice, and then how it might even impact the way we connect with other humans?
Yeah, I would say that modern humans walk around with like an astronaut helmet over our heads. This is how I picture it. And you're inside this little bubble with yourself, with all the critical narratives that tell you how wrong you're doing your life, how you're screwing things up and you're not, and you're inside your own little bubble. Like, what would happen if we could take that off, right? Put it aside. And then know that from your neck down, your heart, your lungs, your body, like there's so much more information that can guide you. And so stillness is what we need to come into that practice, because when we're used to just listening to our heads and we're used to living this analytical world, it's not that that's not important. Like logic, yes, right? Critical thinking, yes. But the stillness of like connecting to your breath and feeling like this dense air that comes in front of you that you can almost cut it, but that sensation of knowing that comes by stilling yourself allows you to maybe relax that clenching that you feel in your belly and soften it. And then
when you just did that, I felt more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Like I could feel you with me differently. And so I'm like, oh, right. Like now we're connecting more deeply. And I suspect that that's part of why we don't want to do it. Part of why I don't want to do it sometimes. Like, ooh, being still is kind of vulnerable.
Yeah. I've had people say, don't tell me to be still. Like, how do you know what I need in terms of being still? I'm like, it's kind of a window in. It's like, it's a contrast, right? It's a tension and a foil because we're so used to the spin, busy, breathy energy of life. And so stillness is contrast. And I can still talk and embody more stillness within myself. My voice might drop a little bit. My feeling is that I'm now living, my awareness is dropping from here, even past my heart, into my belly. And that I'm still connected to you, but now I'm asking more like, what am I sensing in Tracy? I have more room for you to come in, as opposed to maybe, and I wasn't doing this earlier, but often happens in conversations, is defending, right? There's that either plexiglass or it's like heavy SWAT wear. Like there's a defended barrier between people that comes in because we're so used to protecting ourselves from being hurt, vulnerable and or hurt.
Oh, I love that you're talking about this sort of self-protection. I've had this, there's this thing that happens when we teach people about listening, which is they think that just repeating back the words is connection. But what just happened when you just slowed down there is you felt like this big oak tree to me, right? And I could approach you and I could really be with you in this kind of safe, kind of under the shade of your oak tree, right? But a lot of times when folks are doing active listening without that quality of presence that you just brought, it feels like, what intellectual empathy is. Intellectual empathy doesn't always scratch that itch for connection. It feels performative or forced. I don't know where I'm going with what I'm saying, but I'm just still in the experience of having you slow down and make contact with me from that slower place, that it just feels better than that performative kind of reflective listening. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
But
And what I
here's the
mean,
scoop. Why don't we do it like, well, I guess I'm going to answer the question. I suppose it's from how can we let go of more of our protection mechanisms if it's so damn scary for us?
mm,
There's the stillness, but the stillness
mm-hmm,
is kind of scary. So
mm-hmm.
then we engage in all these protection mechanisms. What's the next step? How do we work with some of these protection mechanisms?
Well, protection protects us because we're primed for something negative to come our way.
Mm-hmm.
The reverse of that as a practice might be a great lead in for people who want to try this. So, for example, I'm going to give you a compliment and just notice like what happens in you when I give it to you. I love Sidewalk Talk. I love that you created this organization and it's global, and I love the impact that you're making on the world. Okay. Clearing breath. Just notice how that felt. Now I'm going to ask you to imagine like the front half of your body, like from your forehead, your face, your neck, your chest, your belly. Like if you were to slice your body, vertically, the front half is now a sponge.
Mm,
Okay? And you're going to allow my words to be soaked up by the spongy part of you.
mm.
Okay? It's a different quality of receiving. So now, you ready?
Yeah, I already noticed something. Yeah, go ahead.
You already noticed something. Do you want to say that now, or do you want to save it?
Well, remember what you said before about stillness being a counterpoint? The
Mm-hmm.
sponge is already a counterpoint to what I was doing before. I'm like, oh, I wasn't letting it all the way in before.
Yeah, yeah. So, Tracy, I love that we met at the Hivery, and I love that we've been following each other's work and that you're growing Sidewalk Talk with a vision of reaching more people and teaching them with the program called Here, which I signed up for. And I think you're doing incredible work in the world, and I'm proud to know you as my friend and colleague.
It goes right into my heart, but it hurts a little bit in there. It's tender in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's okay. It's okay to be touched that way.
Yeah. It hurts so good.
It hurts so good. That's it. But can people do this in the workplace? I remember I had a girlfriend of mine at IBM. She goes, oh, I never talk about feelings at work. I said, why would you spend 10 hours a day there? What do you mean? Like, do you show up as a robot?
Yeah.
What we just did, I think some people would think it was really weird.
Yeah, it would be. And so we look for the right times and places and the who's that we can teach it to. And if they can embody it and show up differently enough that people can sense it and ask, like, did you cut your hair? What's going on? It's a little bit different with you. That's part of the movement making.
Right.
Right.
So I hear I hear almost a listening as you're working with the organization. You're sort of listening for the right time and the right set and setting to sort of make these shifts so that it feels safe for the person to be really tapping into aspects of their somatic psychology. And I imagine for some people, you find stuff that's not so cozy.
Yeah. I mean, there's
we hold a lot
trauma,
there,
right? We talk about trauma a little bit. There is trauma under the surface for a lot of people, hidden away, right? And so a lot of the learning that I'm actively doing right now as a practitioner is about trauma and learning about trauma-informed practices. Not that we're dealing with trauma head on in the workplace, but that we're able to understand the context of it and provide context for people, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. See, all I want to do is just gaze into your eyes and be still with you now.
Well, maybe what happens at Sidewalk Talk when you're on the sidewalk? Is there a moment of connection where you just take a breath? Like,
totally.
As a grounding, each person takes their own breath. And then when they're ready, they make eye contact and take a breath together.
Yeah. No, I think that when you're out there in a public sphere like that, you really have to, all you've got is your body because it's so loud and it's so distracting and so really grounding through your body. And you know what? There's this serendipitous thing happening right now. You're making me aware of. So you've just brought up how there's these juxtaposition, these contrast points. That's what listening on the sidewalk is like too, because usually on the sidewalk, you're all about busy.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very rarely in a busy city are you like chatting unless you're at
Mm-hmm.
an outdoor cafe. And so to have someone sit down and be still,
Mm-hmm.
I think it does that exact contrast that you were just talking
Mm-hmm.
about.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
and even for me still, like even for me still, it has an impression on me like, whoa, I live my life so speedy and disconnected still
Mm-hmm.
every time. I actually went and lessoned all alone recently. I've never done that before. It was so fun. Just felt a little quieter to not have a
Mm-hmm.
team of people out there. And a young man
Just
sat
you
down
and
and
another chair.
just me
Two
and
chairs.
another chair and a sign.
Mm-hmm.
Just sat for 2 hours by myself in mindful awareness, and only one person sat down, and it was lovely.
Love it. Love
But
it.
it's weird. People thought it was weird. I mean, people were like, "What are you doing?"
We need to get over that. It's only weird because it's weird not because we're doing something new and crazy. It's weird because we've lost touch with ourselves.
Yeah,
We've lost touch with the practices that make us human, right?
we've lost touch with the practices that make us human. Yeah. Well, that's like where I want to go next. So, what are your practices now that you've been? I
Hmm.
mean, what keeps you? Oh, I'm going to take notes on this one, Wendy. What keeps you
Hmm.
centered and grounded and really able to serve in a way that, is supportive of your own well-being?
Hmm. I want to start really quickly with painting a picture of myself like 10 years ago, right? Like I
Yeah.
had a stress ball in my belly that the doctors couldn't diagnose as something. I had tests done and we couldn't figure out what it was. But once I got my stress under control, it went away. I was someone who couldn't name my feelings. If someone said, "What's going on with you right now? What are you feeling?" I could not for the life of me come up with the right words for how I felt. I was like churning in here. If someone said, "What do you want?" I couldn't say what I wanted. I didn't even know where to find myself inside of it to say that. So, fast forward 10 years, when my alarm goes off, I lie in bed and I put my hand on my heart and my other hand on my belly and I say, "What am I grateful for?"
Mm.
And I just let it cycle through. It'll say my breath. I'm surprised by what comes up because my brain will just kind of grab these concepts. And then after I feel complete, it's usually like a minute, I lie in bed as if I were a cut out paper doll. And I do a body scan over my body, and as if I'm just tracing the outlines of my body, and I'm releasing any expectations in relationships with other people. I'm starting the day with a fresh view on what's possible. So I'm not carrying over grudges. I'm not carrying over anything from the day before as much as I can do, right?
Mm.
I I'm studying at the Strozzi Institute in Petaluma, California. So I have a Joe, which is basically a huge, pretty dowel. It's been sanded so I don't get splinters. And then I do a martial arts practice, not just for doing the martial arts, but it's like grounding in as I'm holding this stick and I'm moving it into martial arts positions. I'm feeling, I feel centered.
Mm.
I can feel what it feels to like extend myself and my intention out into the world, right? Like there's a
Mm.
metaphor that's baked in. And the practice is doing it 5 times. I don't do it 5 times in a row. When I'm stressed or spinning, I go lie on the sidewalk. Sidewalk. There.
Outside?
Outside, I find
Why?
where
Why on the sidewalk?
it's warm usually. I'm in the sun usually. It's flat. It's
Mhm.
clean. I mean, the one in front of my house is clean
I know.
enough
I
that
was like, what? Where I'm sidewalks I'm thinking of, I would not be laying down on that
a
sidewalk.
flat surface, a flat surface. And I use it to like feel that support again on my back, where my back feels like full on support. It's warm. And I lie there just for a few minutes until my nervous system stops crackling and my
Mhm.
nervous system just settles down. And that might be like around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon when I've had a course of the day happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I drink water. I try to get at least 7 hours of sleep. I'm being encouraged to try 8, but that's harder to do because I'm really good early in the morning and I like to stay up late with my daughter at night.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, so what's in store for you next? What's next with Intune? Before I know we've got a few minutes here left before we have our intentional question, but I just want to hear where you're headed next and how we can all support you.
Thanks, Tracy. We're listening to the market and using the skills that we have to really listen to the market. So we see DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, as dignity, belonging, and safety, as putting humans first. Basically, it's helping organizations put human beings first again. So that's what we see diversity, equity, inclusion work as, and we have a recipe for success. So there's 5 steps I'm not going to go into right now, but we help organizations pull on any one of those 5 steps as they've got budget, time, and inclination. But we care about helping workplaces become truly inclusive and belonging places for all people. And we're also helping with remote to hybrid scenarios, because we find that leadership teams have one view of what's needed, and then when they survey the rest of the company, it's very different, right? Especially with millennial workforces, with people traveling, flexibility is the key. And so how do you bake in flexibility into an organization where it may not be fully baked in?
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to have been on this journey with you and gotten to know you along the way. I mean, I think you were just pre-Hivery when we met at the Hivery, and then you did some work for the Hivery. I'm glad that you've used the word belonging like 7 times in this interview, because it's one of my favorite words of all time. It's like the little thing that my little heart is longing for pretty much in every interaction. So I appreciate that. We have this I can't believe this time went by so fast. Sorry for the technical issues. It happens very rarely. If for some reason, guys, some folks might, if they don't get it, we'll post it up, a recording later. But I do want to invite you I want to hand the mic off to you and have you speak directly to our listeners. We have this little ritual for how you and I would close our time together here. And words of wisdom or a wish to all those folks that have decided they want to listen on Sidewalks. What words of wisdom or wish do you want to offer them?
Wow, it's really great. You matter. You deeply matter. You're born in this body that you have in this moment in time in the world's history to be here. And it sounds cliche to talk about you're here for a purpose. And a lot of people get lost there. They find that they don't know their purpose, and it's scary to have that happen. But if you get still, there's a yearning inside you that's been there since you were little. It's been masked maybe by the way you're raised, by your family culture, your gender, by a variety of things, by school, right? By expectations placed on you. And it's time to take back your power as a human being and reconnect to yourself first. It's not selfish. It's vitally important to tap into that reason why you're here and to connect with your own vitality so you can feel what it feels like to know that you matter.
So that you can feel what it feels like to know that you matter. Boy, that just struck a chord with me. So much more than just hearing it, but feeling it. Wow. Wendy, so great to get to connect with you. And for people that listen in on the podcast, you're going to be able to find links to Wendy's organization and her work in the show notes. And we're just thrilled to have had you here.